I still remember the day I received the invitation like it was yesterday. As a local paranormal investigator, I've spent years studying the unknown, exploring the city's darker corners and delving into the world of spirits. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. It arrived at my office, a small, unassuming building in the French Quarter, on a crisp autumn afternoon. A plain white envelope with no return address, containing only a single sheet of paper with an elegant script. Dear Name, we are seeking individuals with a passion for the unknown and a taste for adventure. Join us as we explore the hidden realms of New Orleans, where the veil between worlds is thin. Our team consists of experts from various fields: history, psychology, folklore, and the paranormal. We will delve into the city's most haunted sites, uncovering secrets and facing terrors that few dare to confront. Our goal is not to merely investigate, but to understand the underlying forces that shape our reality. Are you ready to take the leap? Sincerely, the Order of the Black Depths. I was both intrigued and intimidated by the invitation. The mention of the order sent a shiver down my spine. Who were these individuals, and what did they have planned? I couldn't help but feel drawn to the prospect of exploring the unknown, despite the risks. After some deliberation, I decided to attend an introductory meeting at a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town. The evening of the event arrived, and I found myself standing before a group of strangers who seemed just as curious as I was. There was Alex, a historian with a keen eye for detail; Dr. Lee, a psychologist specializing in trauma and fear response; Emily, a folklorist with an uncanny knowledge of local legends; and Jack, a seasoned paranormal investigator with an air of quiet confidence. We spent the next few hours discussing our goals, sharing our experiences, and outlining the scope of our project. The more we talked, the more I realized that this was no ordinary investigation team. We were all drawn to something deeper, something that went beyond mere exploration or curiosity. And then, it happened. The lights flickered, and a low hum filled the room. The air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy, as if the very fabric of reality was shifting. I exchanged uneasy glances with my new colleagues, sensing that we were on the cusp of something momentous or terrifying. I still have no idea what lay in store for us that night, but one thing is certain: our lives would never be the same again. As we arrived in New Orleans, the city's unique energy enveloped us like a thick blanket. Our host, a charismatic figure named Lucian, greeted us at the airport with an unnerving smile. His eyes seemed to hold a secret, one that he wasn't willing to share. We exchanged pleasantries as I followed him to our waiting vehicle, a sleek black van adorned with the symbols of various occult orders. The driver, a woman with an unblinking gaze, handed us each a folder containing our individual files and a map of the city's most haunted sites. Each of us had brought our own theories about New Orleans' dark history and unexplained occurrences. Alex spoke of the city's role in the transatlantic slave trade, while Dr. Lee delved into the psychological effects of living in a place with such a rich and violent past. Emily shared her knowledge of local voodoo traditions, and Jack regaled us with stories of his paranormal investigations. I, too, had done my research, poring over ancient texts and scouring the internet for whispers of the unknown. As we set off into the city's night, the air thickened with an almost palpable sense of anticipation. Lucian's voice cut through the silence, his words dripping with an otherworldly cadence. "Welcome, investigators, to the City of Shadows." We will explore the hidden corners of New Orleans together and unravel the secrets that lie within. The van's GPS led us to our first destination, a crumbling mansion on St. Charles Avenue. As we disembarked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that unblinking eyes were trained upon us from the shadows. Emily shivered, her eyes darting about nervously, while Dr. Lee rubbed her hands together in anticipation. Alex and Jack exchanged a look of quiet determination, their faces set with resolve. Lucian smiled once more, his eyes glinting like dark jewels in the moonlight. "Tonight," he whispered, "we embark on a journey into the very heart of darkness." As we began our investigation, strange noises and movements were reported in various locations, leading to an unsettling sense of unease. The first incident occurred at the old asylum on Magazine Street, where Alex claimed to have heard disembodied whispers in the dead of night. Dr. Lee reported similar experiences at the New Orleans Psychiatric Hospital, where she detected unusual energy patterns that seemed to defy explanation. Emily spoke of feeling an intense presence while researching voodoo rituals in the French Quarter, as if unseen eyes were watching her every move. Jack, meanwhile, had captured eerie footage of a figure lurking in the shadows of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. I, too, experienced strange occurrences, finding cryptic symbols etched into the walls of my office, and sensing an unshakable feeling of being watched when I was alone. The more we investigated, the more we realized that our presence seemed to be stirring something deep within the city's collective unconscious. It was as if we were awakening a slumbering entity, one that would not be silenced or contained. Lucian's words echoed in my mind, "The veil between worlds is thin here." Thin indeed. As the days passed, the occurrences grew more frequent and more intense. We began to feel like we were walking on eggshells, never knowing when the next strange event would strike. And then, there was the night we received a mysterious package at our hotel room. It contained a small, ornate box with no discernible markings or clues. Inside, I found a single, unblinking eye, a glassy orb that seemed to stare into my very soul. Suddenly, the sense of unease became overwhelming. We knew then that we had crossed a threshold, one that would lead us down a path from which there was no return. During a night watch, one of the team members experiences a terrifying encounter with a shadowy figure, blurring the lines between reality and nightmare. The darkness seemed to have a life of its own, twisting and writhing like a living entity. I was stationed at the edge of the courtyard, scanning the rooftops for any sign of movement. Suddenly, I saw her, a woman in a long, flowing gown, her face obscured by shadows. She glided across the courtyard with an ethereal grace, her eyes fixed on me with an unblinking gaze. I tried to speak, but my voice was frozen in my throat. The air around us seemed to thicken, like a physical presence that pressed against my skin. The woman drew closer, her presence filling the space between us. I could feel her breath on my skin, cold and rank with decay. And then she reached out a hand and touched my face. I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body, like a spark of life had been injected into me. The world around me began to distort, like a reflection in rippling water. Reality seemed to bend and warp, revealing hidden truths that I never knew existed. I saw visions of ancient rituals performed by hooded figures in the depths of the swamp. I saw images of forgotten cities, hidden beneath the waves for centuries. And I saw the woman's face, her features shifting like a mask as she revealed her true self. She was not just a figure. She was the embodiment of the city itself, a guardian of secrets and mysteries that lay beyond the veil of reality. As we delved deeper into the mysteries of New Orleans, our research led us to an ancient text referencing the Thelema, a malevolent force that manipulates the veil between worlds. The text spoke of its dark history in New Orleans, where it was said to have been worshipped by ancient cults as a means of gaining power and control. We discovered that the cults had performed twisted rituals, sacrificing innocent lives to appease the lemur and draw closer to its power. The more we read, the more we realized that these rituals were still being performed, hidden from prying eyes by those who sought to harness its power for their own gain. Lucian's words echoed in my mind. The lemur is a force that feeds on fear and suffering. We knew then that we had stumbled upon something sinister, something that threatened the very fabric of our reality. The team decided to investigate further, following a trail of cryptic clues that led us to an abandoned church on the outskirts of the city. As we approached the building, I could feel a malevolent presence lurking just out of sight. We cautiously entered the church, our flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air inside was thick with the scent of decay and rot. We began to search for any signs of recent activity, but it was then that we heard the whispers. Faint at first, they grew louder until we could make out words, "Welcome, mortals. Come and join us." The whispers seemed to be coming from all around us, echoing off the walls. I knew then that we had stumbled into something much bigger than ourselves, something that threatened our very souls. We turned to leave, but it was too late. The doors slammed shut behind us, trapping us inside, and then the darkness closed in. During a séance, the team innocently summons the lemur's presence, unleashing a malevolent storm of supernatural activity and chaos. The air in the room seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. Emily's eyes rolled back in her head, her voice taking on a hypnotic quality as she spoke the words of the incantation. "The lemur, we call upon thee." The words echoed through the room, resonating with an eerie resonance. At first, nothing seemed to happen, but then the lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. I felt a presence in the room, a cold, malevolent force that seemed to be watching me with an unblinking gaze. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of decay and corruption. Suddenly, the shadows around us began to twist and writhe, taking on a life of their own. Candles erupted into flames, casting flickering shadows on the walls. I heard a low, thrumming noise like the beat of a dark and malevolent heart. The room seemed to be shrinking, the walls closing in on us as if we were being squeezed by an invisible hand. And then, the voice spoke. "You should not have called me," it said, its words dripping with malevolence. The voice was low and rasping, like the sound of dry leaves rustling against stone. I felt a wave of fear wash over me, followed by a sense of dread that seemed to seep into my very bones. We knew then that we had made a terrible mistake. We tried to shut down the séance, but it was too late. The lemur's presence had been unleashed, and nothing could stop its malevolent power now. As tensions rise within the group, paranoid behavior and mistrust manifest, causing some members to question their own sanity. Emily's eyes had taken on a glassy, far-off stare, her responses laced with an unsettling detachment. "I don't know what you're talking about," she'd say, her voice flat and unconvincing. We were just discussing the finer points of demonology, but I knew better. I knew that she was hiding something, that there was a part of her that was screaming to be set free. And then there was Lucian, his usually calm demeanor giving way to fits of rage and paranoia. "They're watching us," he'd whisper, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "We have to get out of here." But we were trapped, unable to escape the forces that had brought us together in this God-forsaken place. As the days passed, the group's dynamics began to fray. We started to turn on each other, accusations flying back and forth like a deadly game of verbal tennis. I knew that I wasn't going mad, but it seemed like everyone else was. even myself. The lines between reality and fantasy blurred, making it impossible to know what was real and what was just my own fevered imagination. And then there were the visions. Emily would see things, her eyes rolling back in her head as if she'd been possessed by some malevolent spirit. "I see the devil," she'd whisper, her voice barely audible over the sound of her own ragged breathing. I tried to reassure her, but deep down, I knew that she was telling the truth. We were descending into madness, and there was no escape. One member begins experiencing eerie visions and nightmares, hinting at an ancient connection between their family and the lemur. Emily's eyes took on a haunted look, as if she was reliving memories that weren't her own. She'd see flashes of her ancestors gathered around a dark altar, their faces twisted in ritualistic chanting. The images were disjointed and fragmented, but the sense of foreboding was unmistakable. "I keep seeing my great-grandmother," Emily would whisper, her voice trembling with unease. "She's standing in front of a mirror, staring at her own reflection." I tried to reassure her that it was just her imagination playing tricks on her, but deep down, I knew that there was more to it than that. Lucian started experiencing nightmares as well, his screams echoing through the night as he relived some ancient trauma. "I see my father," he'd gasp, his eyes wide with terror. "He's standing in a dark forest, surrounded by shadowy figures." The visions and nightmares were becoming more frequent, and we knew that we had to dig deeper into our family history to understand what was happening. We spent countless hours poring over old records and speaking to relatives, searching for any clues that might explain the connection between our family and the lemur. And then, one night, we stumbled upon an ancient diary hidden away in a dusty attic. The pages were yellowed with age, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to Emily's great-great-grandmother, who had been involved in some sort of dark ritual involving the lemur. As we read through the diary, the connections between our family and the lemur began to become clear. We were not just innocent bystanders. We were part of a long line of descendants who had made a pact with a malevolent force. As we delved deeper into the mystery, we uncovered evidence of a dark cult operating in New Orleans, believed to be worshiping the lemur, fueling our growing unease. We discovered a series of cryptic symbols etched into the walls of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, symbolizing an otherworldly power that seemed to seep into every corner of the city. The air was thick with an eerie energy, as if the very fabric of reality was being manipulated by forces beyond our understanding. We began to suspect that we were not just innocent bystanders, but rather pawns in a much larger game. The cult's rituals and sacrifices seemed to be centered around the lemur, and we couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being pulled into their dark web. Every creak of the old wooden floorboards made us jump. Every shadow cast by the flickering candles seemed like a malevolent presence lurking just out of sight. We knew we had to get out of there, but our curiosity kept drawing us back in. The symbols on the walls seemed to be pulsing with an otherworldly power, as if they were alive and watching us. We felt like we were being herded towards some dark destiny, one that would forever change the course of our lives. And then we received a message from an unknown sender beckoning us to meet at an abandoned church on the outskirts of town. The note was simple yet chilling. "Come alone, come prepared." We knew it was a trap, but we couldn't resist the allure of the unknown. Little did we know our fate was about to be sealed. During a night patrol, one of the investigators is abducted by unseen forces, only to reappear hours later with no memory of what transpired. We were on high alert as we patrolled the deserted streets, our flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. It was a typical New Orleans night. the kind that made you wonder if the city itself was alive and watching us. Suddenly, I felt a presence behind me, but when I turned around, there was no one there. That's when it happened. A cold, clammy hand reached out from behind, grabbing my wrist and pulling me into darkness. I tried to scream, but my voice was muffled by some unseen force. The last thing I remembered was the feeling of being lifted off the ground, suspended in midair as if I were a puppet on strings. When I came to, I was lying on a cold, concrete floor, my head throbbing with pain, but something was off. I didn't recognize myself. My eyes felt empty, my mind foggy. Where was I? How did I get here? The only clue was a small, silver pendant around my neck, bearing the symbol of the lemur. Panic set in as I realized I had been abducted by some unseen forces, and now I had no memory of what transpired. The hours ticked by at a glacial pace as I lay there, trying to piece together fragments of my past. But it was like trying to grasp sand. The harder I squeezed, the more it slipped through my fingers. I knew I had to get out of there, but my body felt heavy, weighed down by some unseen force. And then I heard footsteps. Light, deliberate steps that seemed to be coming from all directions at once. The soul snatchers were closing in. The remaining team members realize that they are being hunted by an unholy alliance of living dead and supernatural entities connected to the lemur. As we scoured the streets for any sign of Emily, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being herded towards some dark fate. The city seemed to be shifting around us, like a living, breathing entity with its own agenda. Every alleyway led to more questions. Every door creaked open to reveal more terrors. We knew we had to get out of New Orleans, but the streets seemed to be conspiring against us. It was as if the lemur itself was guiding our pursuers, leading them straight to us. The living dead were just the beginning. I could sense other, more sinister presences lurking in the shadows. Demons, vampires, and who knew what else lurked in every corner, waiting to strike. We knew we had to find Emily before it was too late, but every step forward seemed to lead us further into the abyss. The symbols on the walls seemed to be pulsing with an otherworldly energy, drawing us deeper into the heart of darkness. And then I saw her, Emily's ghostly form, materializing in front of me, her eyes black as coal, her skin deathly pale. "We have to get out of here," she whispered, her voice like a sigh on the wind. "They're closing in." We knew we had to move fast, but our feet felt rooted to the spot. The world around us was spinning out of control, and all I could do was watch as Emily vanished into thin air, leaving me with no choice but to follow. In a desperate bid for survival, the group performs a ritual to banish the lemur back to its own realm, but at a terrible cost, their very souls. We huddled together in the dimly lit alleyway, our eyes fixed on the ancient tome lying before us. The words seemed to leap off the page, burning with an otherworldly fire that made my skin crawl. We knew we had to act fast, to perform the ritual before the lemur's minions found us. The air was heavy with anticipation as we began the incantations, our voices rising and falling in a cadence of fear and desperation. Sweat dripped from our brows as we invoked the ancient powers, feeling the weight of our own mortality bearing down upon us. And then, it happened, a blinding flash of light, a sense of being torn apart at the seams, and I was staring into the abyss. The lemur's presence was like a palpable thing, its power suffocating me with an unseen force. I felt my soul being ripped from my body, leaving behind a hollow shell that trembled with fear. The others were going through the same thing, their faces contorted in agony as they screamed our names into the void. The ritual was working, but at what cost? We knew we had to push on, no matter how much it hurt. The lemur's minions were closing in, and if we didn't banish it back to its own realm, we'd be consumed by its dark power forever. With a final, shuddering cry, I felt my soul being torn free from my body, leaving behind a husk of skin and bone that lay limp on the ground. The others followed suit, their screams echoing through the alleyway as they too were dragged into the abyss. And when it was all over, we lay there, our souls torn from our bodies, our eyes vacant and unseeing. We knew we'd never be the same again, that we'd been forever changed by the horrors we'd faced in that dark, twisted world. The lemur's power still lingered, a malevolent presence that haunted our every waking moment. But we knew we had to keep moving forward, no matter how much it hurt, for if we didn't, we'd be trapped forever in this living nightmare of darkness and despair.